that it went through. And as soon as I know that I am live...
And what your video is just an interview, or this is going to be audio only and you're going to put it over footage of the game, or what's the output?
We're gonna shoot the shit here today and like talk about... I have a bunch of questions. Mm-hmm. I think the vast majority of it in the final product, like we're gonna do this in front of an audience this time. There will be viewers, but the final will probably just mostly be audio. But like I'll occasionally probably cut back to us.
Are you saying you're streaming this right now in front of a live audience?
Yes, is that all right?
Oh, it's totally fine, but I should let people know. Let me. Can I get a link?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let me do that right now.
Yeah, I had no idea. I had no idea. I didn't put my face on. Come on now.
Well, I mean, you have the hat.
That's all I need. That's all this is as good as it gets, baby. Come on.
Hold on, everybody watching. We will begin our conversations in just a moment. I want to, well, first off, let everyone know that we're here, and then we'll have something to talk about. Okay, I'm gonna send it to your. I'm sending it through your DM.
Okay, that was email or direct message?
Direct message. And I should probably also tweet about this. For an internet person, I am terrible at interneting.
Well, that's that's not so good. Hang on. Bubba.
Want to apologize to everybody watching me currently. As you can imagine, in the final cut of the actual video, this probably will not make it.
Okay, let me see. I think that went out. There you go. All right, ready to go when you are.
Yep, just putting out this tweet, and then I'm going to send it over to my Discord. And then we'll be good to have an actual conversation.
Okay, no worries. I'm just watching the world fall apart or America fall apart while you're doing that. Don't worry about it. I'll be here.
Oh, so we have time. Operating off 3 computers at once is also probably not super helpful.
Everybody tells me I need to get a producer, which I do, but it's because there's just, I'm not technical, but I know enough to know what I don't know. Mm-hmm. But, I try to get a producer, and then it's like, oh, look, Miss Marvel's on. So I go watch that.
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm really a big fan of the actress. So
you're what?
I'm a big fan of the actress because like she seems to know her shit and be a giant nerd, and that's the exact person you want to see get these roles. The first episode feels a little over directed, like they're trying so hard to give it a style. Mm-hmm. They kind of walk away from that as the subsequent 2 episodes roll on, and I think it's pretty good. I'm digging it. But again, I must be an easy crowd because I liked Obi-Wan too, and a lot of people are like, how could you like Obi-Wan? I'm like, because it's fucking cool. Yeah, I didn't see Obi-Wan yet, but I don't know what I saw of it. Seemed interesting.
I like Book of Boba Fett. I wasn't as good as Mandalorian, but it was Boba Fett. What do you fucking want? So I don't know. I don't get Star Wars fans anymore. I used to be a huge Star Wars fan. I still consider myself such, but we don't like the same things anymore, clearly.
Yeah, I remember people not liking the sequel trilogy, and I wasn't a fan of it either. I didn't think that. I
didn't. Yeah, but I mean.
But everything after that seems to be valid. Like it seems.
Yeah,
to be
but I mean, even the sequel trilogy was like, it wasn't. There's some moments. It wasn't great. but it's like, you know, every James Bond movie is not great, but it doesn't mean that, you know, it's like it comes and goes, but at least you're getting some fucking Star Wars, you know. That's how I see it.
Yeah, for me, I just think that Disney didn't put enough thought. Like it was very clear to me that their idea, their concept of what to do with Star Wars next was just, you know, make money. They didn't really have like a creative direction, and I thought that hurt the sequel trilogy. But like, I think that everything since then has been pretty great, actually. So
yeah,
they've been making.
I mean, hell, I was a kid. Well, I was a teenager when, like, you know, Caravan of Courage and the Ewok movie, and you know, that was shit. But it didn't. You know, it's like, okay, and then suddenly something else comes along and it's good. It's just, it's, you know, I don't know. I dig it for what it is, I guess. But all right, I'm ready when you are. It looks like we are live, right? So let's do it.
Yes, sir. We are ready to go. As you said before, this probably won't be as fun as watching Hercules for Bad Movie Night.
You what? That was good.
But I've been thinking about it, and if we have the availability around the time the Twisted Metal series comes out, I say we take a look at the Death Race movies.
That would be great. You know, I got a email from the Sony people last week. I was dealing with COVID all last week, and I'm still tired. And they're like, hey, do you want to come down to New Orleans where we're shooting for the finale? And I'm not going to tell you what the finale is, but the finale episode of season 1. And I like, if there was teleportation and I could just sort of step into a pod and be there, I would. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to fucking fly to New Orleans and go to the airport and all that shit. So I'm probably going to skip it. But, you know, maybe I'll just tell them to put my name up at a bar, call it like, you know, drink at a bar, name it after me in the series so I can be in the canon. Because I was going to go down and do a cameo.
Really?
But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But anyway, the point is, yes, I've never seen, I watched a little bit of the remake of Death Race, and of course I've seen the original. I haven't gone back and watched any other ones.
I've been told, I have it on good authority that the second one is must see for those who like bad movies. So.
Oh, good. Oh, I love bad movies. They are the best. I literally subscribe $7 a month. I paid a Full Moon Video because they have their entire catalog of just some of the worst schlocky crap that's ever been made, and it's just a joy. It's a delightful joy.
Well, speaking of delightful joys, I think...
Don't talk about my penis. What? Come on now. Let's go.
Speaking of delightful joys, Twisted Metal Black was one of the most delightful, nightmare-inducing experiences of my entire childhood.
How old were you when you played it or saw it or whatever?
I think I had to be somewhere between like 9 and like 13. Oh,
good. So it hit you at the right age of intro to horror. I don't know if it was your intro, but certainly contributed, at least it sounds like, which is great. I love hearing that. That was never the intention. It never would have occurred to any of us working on it that we, you know, you don't think about, at least I don't, when you're making stuff like this, whether it's this, or the earlier ones, or God of Wars, or what have you, you don't have the access to know how it's affecting people. So you hear about it after the fact, and it's like, oh, that's so neat, you know, that something I contributed to affected people, maybe certainly not in the same because they were better, but sort of along similar lines that, like, going to see Friday the 13th or Halloween with my brother in the theater affected, you know, I'm just like, wow, we did that to some extent for some people. That's pretty fucking cool. So I love hearing that. I'm not supposed to say that. I mean, time has passed, obviously, but I remember even when we did the action figures, it's like, it's an M-rated game. We can't put these in toy stores, even though the figure isn't an M-rated figure. And it's like, but I knew, come on, fucking moron. Of course we all knew that, you know, that's what you do when you're 12, 13, 14. You sneak the fucking shit you're not supposed to see. And that's how you do it, you know?
Well, I'll tell you how I actually was able to get my parents to help me get that game. Yeah. Because the only experience up until that point that I had with Twisted Metal, because I was younger, was Twisted Metal 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I played that game, and I loved that game. I don't think I would have loved it if I would have played, like, the other Twisted Metals before it. But since that was my introduction, I loved that game.
Sure.
And then I was like, there's a new Twisted Metal? I gotta get this. And my mother
Yeah.
was like, oh, it's rated M. I was like, yeah, but you've seen the other one. How bad could it be?
That's right. Well, it would have been worse if they wouldn't have made us cut some of the footage, but
which is definitely something I gotta bring up
Yeah.
today, because I just found, like, I went down a rabbit hole, essentially, because I was getting hyped for the upcoming Twisted Metal show that's coming out, and I was just doing some research, and a lot of what it from my perspective, a lot of what is being put into the show seems to be somewhat derived from Twisted Metal Black specifically, including some of the characters who I don't think have been in any other Twisted Metal games. So then all of a sudden I went down a rabbit hole of Twisted Metal Black, and I landed on a couple videos that had all the unused cutscenes and, like, what was on the cutting room floor, and
okay. I didn't know that footage ever saw the light of day. Maybe we're talking about different things, but yeah, I'd love to hear.
Well, I found out, like, Dollface's entire backstory was entirely different.
Oh, just that it was her father.
It was her father, yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of, like,
Mr. Creel.
Mr. Creel, yeah.
Which was directly from Warhawk. That was the bad guy in Warhawk, was Creel. And the movies were written, I wrote them or co-wrote them along with Jeff Goldsmith, who was the editor of Warhawk and Twisted Metal 1 and the kind of co-director of the movies in Twisted Metal 2. So he put that in just as a throwback. But yeah, it was supposed to be her dad that locked her in the mask, and it was like, oh, that's a bridge too far. It's like, okay.
You know what? I almost get it, though, because I watched it, like, now, and I like, cringed a little bit. Not in a bad way, but, like, you know, like, wow, that's fucking even more terrifying and frightening to think about, which, you know, that just Twisted Metal Black in general, I think, was the best nightmare fuel I could have never asked for. Like, I didn't know what I was expecting when I first played the game, but then the second that I played it, I was hooked.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
It literally did give me nightmares as a kid.
Oh, that's wonderful. Like, what happened? Give me one.
You know what? It was a lot of, not as much Sweet Tooth as you would think, but a lot of, what's his name? Billy Ray?
No Face. Oh, Billy Ray. Yeah, Billy Ray, whatever. The Stillwell.
Yeah, Billy Ray Stillwell. Yeah, a lot of him and a lot of Bloody Mary, which should have informed my dating choices later in life, but unfortunately it had the opposite effect.
Oh, you dated the nice girls?
No, I dated the crazy women. I should have stayed away from them.
Oh, you should have learned your lesson. Yes. I see. Well,
yeah. I'm doing better now, though, so we're
good.
I have, like, a list of a whole ass list on this computer over here.
Yeah.
Like, questions from everything. So I want to apologize because I'm gonna bore you a lot with a lot of these, and almost all of them are going to be story based more than, like, the actual.
That's fine.
Gameplay.
Yeah, I worked on the. I was gonna say is Jeff and I wrote the stories with Martin Mercer, who is also the storyboard artist and one of the concept artists for Black, and that was there was one night I stayed with them for 24 hours, but there were a couple nights before that they were sleeping under tables at the office, and you know these were originally supposed to be fully animated movies. And I know Jeff and I both really wanted to do them, but as production started to roll on, we were just like, we're not going to be able to do this. And, you know, one of Jeff's superpowers is he's probably the most tenacious person I've met, and it serves him incredibly well. But in this case, they lost their patience. They were just like, look, we're not going to get these in if we do it the way they're storyboarded. We can't make a 90-minute animated movie. We just don't have the time or the budget. So we ended up going with the narrative, like the characters talking, and there were more still images. And we brought on, oh my God, Paul Jenkins, a real well-known comic book writer, wrote the origin of Wolverine and wrote a bunch of Spider-Man and stuff. And he came on and noodled with the dialogue to make it more POV. But yeah, I don't know why I went down that rabbit hole either, but there you go. Again, anybody watching this, I had COVID last week. I'm pretty much done. But the one thing that remains is the fatigue and the sort of fuzzy brain. So hopefully that'll vanish sooner than later. But anyway, yes, ask your question. I'm ready. Let's do it.
No. That's, hey, listen, anything you say about the series is informing me and informing the video that I'm going to make. So I appreciate it nonetheless. So why did it? Was it like timing issues? Were there like some time constraints and it would take too long to animate, like in full?
Well, it was, again, this is, yeah. I mean, Sony's very different now. Sony has not just wonderful internal and external, but all these wonderful support services. And so it's easy now to go to the visual supports group in San Diego and say, hey, we want to make this. And not always, but more often than not, you're going to make it with that crew. And they'll be like, okay, yeah, we've done 100 of these. This is your budget. This is the time. Here's some, here's a 20% contingency depending on things going shit. But back then, we didn't really have those sorts of resources. And so it was like we made some calls and Jeff made some calls and we made assumptions. And we weren't happy with some of the stuff that was coming in, so that we didn't factor in the fact that it might take 10 iterations to get Sweet Tooth in the movies looking good enough. And so by the time we started to realize that we just weren't going to make it, we had already boarded it and written it as it was an animated thing. But yeah, that was the intention. And then we were just like, yeah, we're not going to make it. So let's figure out a way to use what we have, tell the same stories, but actually make it so we can make our release date.
Yeah, it actually, I think it like benefited it in a way, because it was almost like less, how do I put this? It felt like it was a stylized choice as opposed to a last minute decision.
I mean, that's always what you tell yourself and hope when you're trying to convince yourself it's acceptable. And sure, I mean, you don't know what you don't know is gone if you didn't know it was meant to be there in the first place. But ultimately, though, yeah, I think it worked. I think because we did point of view narration or first person narration, the sort of past tense aspect of it gave it a little bit of like a storytelling framework anyway. And in that that helped it. But, they worked out really well, though. People seemed really happy with them. I've often said, and I still believe this, that Twisted Metal Black, people ask me a lot, what is my favorite one? And I don't think Twisted Metal Black is the best playing one, but I think Twisted Metal Black is the one that nailed the intellectual property better than any of the other ones. I mean, I know some people have a soft spot for the cartoony 1 and 2 and all that, but in terms of just sort of an enriching, interesting world in which to create new stories and new games and stuff, I think Black was the best we did.
So from like a creative standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, gameplay I'm happy with, but I don't think it's as good as 2, and I don't think it's as deep as 2013's, but I think the world is really rich. So when people ask me, do you want to make another Twisted Metal? I have some ideas, but I don't really have much of a desire to get back into card combat. But if someone said, hey, do you want to work with a writer on a graphic novel, about the characters in Twisted Metal Black, I'd say, oh, shit, yeah, that'd be fun.
And I would be like, oh, shit, yeah, tell me where I can buy it.
Right. Yeah, you never know. I wanted Sony for the longest time before they founded PlayStation Productions. I was just like, I could pretty much easily raise about $1.5 million, $2 million to fund a Sweet Tooth hardcore guerrilla filmmaking style slasher movie. I don't know if you saw like the movie Terrified with Art the Clown, who's fucking awesome. But sort of in that realm. And then before any of that really got anywhere, they ended up making PlayStation Productions, and now Will Arnett is Sweet Tooth and Samoa Joe is Sweet Tooth, which is interesting, very cool. I may go down there. If I'm going to get my ass on a plane, it's probably because I want to meet Samoa Joe, only because I want to tell him I want you to get me on the phone with Becky Lynch and Asuka and Ronda Rousey, just because they're my girlfriends. But other than that, I'll probably stay here in San Diego. Anyway.
Well, yeah. Before I get into the questions, I just want to say, like, the lack of movement in the actual cutscenes, I think, added to the unsettling nature of Twisted Metal Black, and it also kind of like highlighted when you did see like direct movement, it felt like a little bit more of a bigger deal. Like this was the focal point of the scene that you're watching.
I think we got 50% lucky that sometimes lack of budget is the parents of innovation and interesting ideas, because you have no choice. And I think the other 50% is like, yeah, it could have been better if it was all moving in a different way, but it worked out within reason.
All right, so here's my general questions. I actually have them cut up and listed by certain characters. So I have
however you want to do it. Don't care.
I have a list of questions for like each character. So I'm sorry again about that.
Yeah. Are they bad questions?
No, they're actually all about like the story. Some of them are a little bit more simplistic than the others. Some of them I probably know the answers to, but are
how deep of an answer do you want in these? Because I mean, there's two ways this could go. If we don't really decide on a duration of question and answers, we'll probably give really nice, deep, rich answers. But in an hour and a half, I'll be too tired to keep going. Or if you're like, I want to get all of them answered, so stick to 2 to 3 sentences.
We could probably cover them all in an hour and a half.
All right. Well, you let me know when you've gotten enough per answer then.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Listen, the more you have to say, the more knowledgeable I am in what I'm talking about. So it's helpful.
Sure, but we could leave the entire conversation with you knowing everything about Sweet Tooth's boots and nothing else, though, is my point.
Okay, so now I have to erase the questions about
I just made that up. All right, here we go. Let's go.
All right. Some of the names are listed a little bit differently, like in the behind the scenes. I don't know if this. I just want to know, is that a placeholder name or?
I don't know what you mean.
Raven was called Sad Sally. Cage was referred to as Marv. John Doe Ed.
Oh, where are you seeing they were referred to those? Like, where are you seeing Ed and Sad Sally?
Oh, they were on like the files, and a couple of the videos uploaded them directly as like those names as opposed to the characters.
So if you play the game, it says Ed or Sad Sally on their file?
I think on the file, yeah. Not in the story or anything like that.
I mean, I don't know. My guess would be those names absolutely sound like what we were calling them when they were being written. Like, obviously, John Doe is based off Ed Norton visually. Which clearly will tell you, because people are like, didn't you do you have a crush on Ed Norton, Jaffe? It's like, no, but my wife did. And so he was on mine, but also because he was in the story, John Doe was undercover as a white supremacist skinhead kind of guy, which is what we were basing him off of from American History X. Sad Sally, I don't know, but basically what I will tell you is if those names exist in some way where you can see them, it's probably because when we were writing them, and it could even go all the way up to, we were calling her Sad Sally, for example, when the work order went off to whoever, I forget at this point, did the CG. And even though we changed her name to Raven, maybe Sad Sally didn't clear legal. I have no idea. I don't remember. Sad Sally was what ended up sort of sticking around. So there's no real story behind, those were names we started with. I don't remember why we changed them. It may have been that when we went to POV conversation and it was Raven talking, I don't know if she ever refers to herself, but it would be weird if she called herself Sad Sally, but I don't really know.
Okay. My question was just like those were never like the intended like actual names of the characters.
They might have been.
Oh,
I mean, they those were names that we came up with while we were writing. That sounds very familiar. Certainly, Ed makes sense. I could see us calling her Sad Sally, and what do we call the other guy? Rage or Rave or?
Cage was referred to as Marv. It says.
Marv. Oh, right. So yeah, I don't know where you're getting those names. So Marv was because visually we were basing him off Marv from Sin City. So we would call him Marv in discussions, but in that case we knew this isn't going to be Marv. This is going to be, we can't use that name. But that was kind of the inspiration, was Frank Miller's version of, or Frank Miller's Marv from his take on Sin City, not the movie, of course. So these sound like they were the shorthand names we used, and maybe some of them stuck and some of them didn't, but I'd have to see where you're getting these names from, because I'm almost certain on the folder it doesn't say Marv in the Blackfield Asylum. Like, I don't know where did you see Marv? Like, where did you see this name? Where would you have seen it?
Actually, like on several YouTube videos that are showing, like when they refer to the unused cutscenes, they do so by saying like the character's actual name in the game, but then like AKA, or I'm sorry, the name that was not used, AKA the name that was used. So
I don't know. Maybe if you look at the manual, it says, Raven, aka Sad Sally. Like maybe when it's describing the characters, that was sort of her name in the asylum. Who knows? I don't fucking know. It's a mystery to me. I'm sure it's a solvable mystery, but I don't know. Hey, baby. Yeah. If I can, yeah. Here, are you going to the pool? Okay. You there?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, when I was playing the game, I realized that for some reason it seems like the characters' models in the menu screen doesn't necessarily, like, doesn't add up to the what the models look like in the actual game.
It's been so long. My guess would be that here's what I don't remember: the actual menu screen where we're moving the camera, through the car battle sequence. My guess, I know that was put together at Incog out in Utah in terms of putting together the pieces of digital film, and depending on sort of Dragon's Lair style, whatever the player pressed the button, it would branch to this film piece or that film piece. What I don't know is, did we provide them all of the individual shots, or was that something they built out in Utah, and then we had to try within our best to sort of merge what the characters ended up looking like in the movies to what I don't remember. Was there one that's really stand out as it seems incredibly different?
Billy Ray Stillwell looks completely like his face looks very different than it does, and Bloody Mary kind of did the same thing. There's little other examples like just Agent Stone not having a helmet and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm looking at it right now. I'm pulling it up to see. It's one of those things where okay, there he is. Okay, there's Billy Ray. Yeah, I mean, he still kind of looks sort of like, inbred hillbilly family, but sure, he looks more like Frankenstein's monster in the movies. And in this, he looks a little bit more almost comedic as he's breaking out of the car or flying out of the junkyard dog. I really, the thing is, it's, yeah, it's hard to remember. It's, I know when did we work on this? This must have been 1999. So we're talking 21, 23 years ago, depending on, so I'd like to say I still have those. I have a lot of specific memories, but things like that I don't remember.
It would help if I could bring this up right now. Super unprepared for today. Oh, I don't know why I didn't just think to ask this immediately. When I was playing the game, I noticed that a lot of the other character models appear in the other character stories. I wanted to know, was that just something that was done for budgetary reasons, or was that?
Give me an example, because it sounds like something we would do both from a story standpoint and also from a budget standpoint. But
the Billy Ray Stillwell, his original model, and his wife, they were both used in they were the
story.
Yes, they were the parents of the baby, the preacher.
That was probably budget. I mean, I think it was like, we hope nobody would notice, or maybe we changed her hair color. I don't fucking know, but yeah, I mean, if I remember, it was like every time we needed a new character, at the time, now it would be a lot more, but at the time it was probably like $6,000 to $8,000 to make a character. And we obviously had sort of the star characters that had more detail. And then we had sort of like his wife, which probably was $4,000 to make. But we were like, well, we can't afford to make all these extras, so let's just reuse them like SNL does. I don't fucking know.
Yeah,
so
Preacher.
I had forgotten about that, but yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, Preacher was in Preacher was also in Sweet Tooth's story, obviously, and
sure.
I think John Doe was in Agent Stone's story.
Well, yeah, that would make sense. I mean, I've always liked the kind of, even if you go up to 2012's Twisted Metal, you know, and for the people who watch those stories in that one, a lot of people don't catch that the intersection where Sweet Tooth is buried, Dollface has her car crash, and Mr. Grimm is shot, it's all on the exact same intersection, right? So I've always liked this idea. People always ask me, what is the canon? And it, you know, we were multiverse before there was multiverse, in that there is no, it's kind of the canon is like whoever wins the contest is depending on who you're playing. But I've always liked this idea that there is this kind of thing that sits above the individual stories, almost like Marvel's The Watcher or Paul Atreides in Dune, where he can see all the permeations of possibility branching off of these locations. So, I mean, that was never part of the story, but I did like the fact that John Doe, who is a white supremacist undercover character, would also be in the story with Agent Stone, who's going after these skinheads who have taken over this apartment building. So, you know, but some of this stuff isn't really that thought out. And I don't mean that like, I can't speak to anyone else. I would imagine if you sat down with Ken Levine, he would have a great deal of stuff thought out. Corey probably would as well for God of War. For me, I was maybe a step above in terms of my willingness to be okay with not knowing. Like, it was never random, but it was, if it was cool enough and I could justify it, it went in. So I remember, even if you go back to Twisted Metal 2, there's the scene where Minion comes and takes Calypso down to hell. And I remember just sitting in the voice recording, and the voice actor who was Minion, I was just like, throwing this line about his sister. Let's make it like his sister's in Hell 2 or something. He's like, okay. None of that was planned. None of that was thought out. But I'm like, you know what? If anybody ever asks, I'll come up with something and we'll make it part of the next story. So some of this stuff is planned. Some of it's like, fuck it, we're out of money. And some of it is like, it's kind of planned, but I don't really know. So.
Yeah, that was Twisted Metal 2. I remember like being confused because I was like, did he mean to say his daughter?
Sister, I think.
Yeah. No, he said
I think
sister.
it was his sister.
No, he said sister, but like in my head, I was like, was that a mistake on their part? Because like I know.
Yeah, you know, I mean, like I said, it's one of those things that it's like, hey, if people want to know, if we get lucky enough to make a proper sequel, we'll address it then. It's not good writing, but I never claimed to be a good writer. So, you know, a good writer would have all that shit worked out and go, well, let me, you know, it's too much work for me.
Hey, I mean, I think it stands to reason that it would take a better writer to come up with the stuff on the spot and then create a canon from it, or as opposed to just going into it with it all.
Within reason. I mean, I think there is a responsibility. And again, I mean, you know, what's interesting about the industry in general is that there was a time when I was one of the best intellectual property creators in video games, and I don't say that in a you know, brag way or anything. I'm saying that there was a time around 1998 to 2006 where whatever I could bring was more than anyone else was bringing, or with a hand. There's like 10 of us or 6 or 7 of us or something. But after that, because the industry evolved and the medium evolved, my stuff really was slapdash. It was kind of like, yeah, you can write knock-knock jokes, but suddenly when, you know, Henny Youngman and then eventually Milton Berle and then eventually Jerry Seinfeld and Louis C.K. and all that, they're so much more advanced now that I, you know, somebody asked me the other day, it's like, she's like, hey, do you want to come on this podcast I do about writers and video games? And I'm like, yeah, I'll come on it if you guys want me, but, you know, I don't. The writers today in video games, they're writers. You know, I was a guy doing, you know, 4-page, you know, heavy metal magazine short stories, and it's like, hey, that's kind of a cool twist ending. Let's go to lunch. You know, it was not the height of the art form, but at the time it was.
Well, that actually brings me to my next question. That's a pretty good lead-in. The whole twist of Twisted Metal Black that a lot of
Yes.
people have speculated on, and like I think it's what captured a lot of people's investment in the game, is when you beat the game and then Minion,
Yep.
obviously you decode all of his messages. Was that reveal always planned? Like me, that was a last minute inclusion as well.
That was I was the guy who wrote all the text between levels, right? So if you remember on the loading screens, there were a shot of the character's head, whatever character you were playing, and then to the right, every level had a new little, paragraph, 2 paragraph inner monologue, like, oh, I remember this place when I was abused. Now I'm, whatever their story was. And I had Minion, which we were like, oh shit, we can get Minion in. So I'm like, Scott at Single Tracker, Incog was like, well, we need the writing for that. Can you do that? I'm like, yeah. And then I got the flu and I was really fucking sick and I had no energy. And so I was just remember sitting, where did I do the story? Where did I write this game? I think it was in LA. So yeah, I must have been, I was in LA. I remember, I think I was in the kitchen and I had the flu and I was like, oh, let me put in this code thing. That'll be kind of cool. And then as I was just making up the story, it just kind of was like, oh, that'd be cool if it's, because, in Twisted Metal 2, we had the thing where a lot of it, like the Wizard of Oz, was in Roadkill's head when he woke up from his coma, if you won that character. And so I think it was inspired by that, but it was really just sort of a last minute, like, oh, that's kind of weird and cool and fits the vibe and theme. And it was one more of those ideas that I think feel like it's a deeper, well thought out, and it never was. It never was.
That was like, I swear to you, I have a best friend, Paul, and we both were hardcore into like this game. And he would call me every couple days and be like, dude, okay, so, and give his like entire like conspiracy theory about what the game means and who these characters represent in Sweet Tooth's life. So
what I'll say, okay, but here's what I'll say on that. There was a time where I would laugh about that because it's so funny what fans will take of something and run with. And that was sort of my way of viewing it for, I started as nothing but a fan, and I thought the same thing. It blew my mind when I heard things like, oh, Spielberg didn't want to make Raiders the way he made it. He wanted to make it more of a serious story, but he decided not to. I'm like, what? It's perfect the way it is. And, when somebody I remember going to USC and we went to this screening at the film school of talk radio from Oliver Stone. And I remember somebody asked him about, what is the symbolism behind why you mix your movies really loud? Is it meant to reflect the growing, anger in the zeitgeist or whatever? And he says, I was in Vietnam and I got hit by a bullet in the helmet and it made me deaf in one ear, right? And so I can't hear that well in that ear. So we tend to over mix. So anyway, for a long time I assumed, isn't that funny that these fans think this, blah, blah, blah. But as I've gotten older, maybe the last 10 years, I've realized that it's not magic. When you talk about it, it sounds magic. It's not magic, but it's psychological. There are things that I think creatives do, really diligent creatives and fly by the seat of your pants creatives like me, that are, I think, communicating at a unconscious level and mean a lot more. So my point is, if you and your friend and a lot of people, you're not the only ones, got something out of Twisted Metal Black that was never conscious on my part, I don't think anymore that means, oh, you silly fans. That I think it means that may have been there. Because when I finish a game and I look back at a game, I find out a lot of stuff. It's like a long, hardcore therapy session. If you look at Twisted Metal Black and you look at God of War, which were made back to back, both of those are about dysfunctional families. The stories are all about, and if you look at 2012's, it's all about family. There's a lot of shit I'm clearly working through in these games that, even though I'm not doing it consciously, maybe there is stuff there. But I think that's anything. I think that's any story that resonates, whether it's intentional or not. If you picked up on it, maybe your friend was right, but it wasn't conscious. That I'll tell you.
That's awesome, actually. I think creative works are the best therapy one can have.
Yeah, every game I've worked on, at the end of it, I go, "Oh, that's what I was about."
Yeah.
I had no idea. I was doing press on Twisted Metal Black, telling people, "Oh, it's about depression," just because it was a good soundbite. And at the time, again, I was one of the top of the food chain kind of IP creators, and they bought it and they ran with it. I didn't know, I had people in my family who had suffered from depression. I didn't fucking know what do I know? But it wasn't about depression. It was about family. But I didn't know that when I was doing it. So
Twisted Metal Black was like the Fast and Furious of the franchise.
Different kind of family. Yeah, yeah. This family was more like the Hillbilly Family in the X-Files episodes where they kept the mother under the bed that they pulled around on the rolling platform. That's more what I'm talking about.
That'd be a hell of a tagline for Twisted Metal Black. It's all about family. Get that M rating right.
Or their family is just like yours. The difference is you won't admit it. Something like that.
I wanted to ask, what was cut from the game? Like, I've obviously seen a bunch of it, but like, is there anything that was never even like animated, like something that was like just conceptual and didn't make it?
Well, I mean, I'm sure there was tons that was conceptual that didn't make it for budget reasons, or Jeff came in with a great idea that I hated, or I came in with a great idea that he hated, or we loved it, but Martin's like, I can't fucking draw that. What are you talking about? That's insane. So the things I remember are the things that got far enough. Look, so at the very beginning, the thing, I don't know how many people know this. I can't imagine I haven't said this, but maybe I haven't, was I wanted this shit to be dark. And I don't mean our dark. I mean disturbing. Like the original, for a long time, I would not let go of the fact that I wanted the entire gameplay to be played with a red filter over the camera. And I have concept art. I could find it. I'd have to search for it really hard, but I might be able to find it. And I wanted every scene to just be shot through like this sort of fever dream red filter. The whole thing just to feel like not even like a normal video game, And so the stories, we went to really kind of dark sources. We went, there's we were looking at Fincher with 7, and apparently that's where we got the idea. I'm going to get the guy's name wrong, but it's something like Peter Joel Whitkin, or Joel Peter Whitkin, who's a photographer, or what? I think he's still working, and maybe he's dead. I don't know. And he would go down to Mexico and get corpses, and he would pose them, and it was deliciously, horrifically disturbing. And I wanted that level of darkness, right, and weirdness, right? So the original movies, and we were pretty pro on this, and Sony was pro on this. It just ended up being it was going to take too long. The movie Being John Malkovich was out. I don't know if you remember that movie, but in the movie, John Cusack plays a puppeteer, like a marionette puppeteer, and he has these very elaborate puppet shows. And Jeff had the idea, it's like, what if Sweet Tooth, we shoot this live action, and Sweet Tooth pulls up into the back of a playground and opens his back doors. And obviously all the kids are entranced, and, oh, look at this crazy clown with his hair on fire. And he performs these puppet shows with these incredibly detailed and creepy puppets out of the back of his ice cream truck for the kids. And each one of the puppet shows would have been one of the stories of the drivers. And then at the end, depending on the kid that was most enamored, and I think he like picked one kid to kill based on how they responded to the stories, and one kid to become his protege based on, and everybody else was just like, where did Tommy and Lily go? It's like, I don't know, they're in the van. So I mean, that's stuff that we never even got very far on, because we reached out to the puppet people who made the puppets on Malkovich, and there was a conversation that happened, and then it just ended up, it's like, this is going to be too expensive and take too long to make all of these puppets. We need like 25 puppets. But then there was the stuff that we actually generated and wrote and recorded, and that's the stuff people know about, like not the Europe stuff. The Europe stuff's a different issue. A lot of the stories got cut to hell in Europe, which had nothing to do with Sony. But in America, we lost. We had to make the preacher a not a preacher, but a evangelist. As an agnostic atheist, I don't know the fucking difference. They're all crazy to me. But yeah.
You also didn't you also have to throw in a line where he's like, "I wasn't actually even."
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
He says, "I wasn't even a preacher. I had been rejected by the church," or something like that. We had to make it clear that this was not a official religious guy. He had been rejected by them, but he clearly was. Come on. And then there's a wonderful scene or a shot with the preacher shoving the baby into the baptismal and drowning it, and the baby's little legs kicking and all this, and the crying, and I loved it. It was just such a wonderfully dark, disturbing piece of storytelling, and we had to cut that. The one that bothered me more, like I get it. I think religion's stupid personally, but the fact is, I know we live in a world where a lot of people are into it. Sure, fine, it's a business. You got to make some changes. Or showing drowning a baby versus implying it. Okay, the one that bugged me was when Bloody Mary hit the kid with the pipe, who pushed Bloody Mary. I think this was Bloody Mary. Pushed Bloody Mary down in the mud.
Yeah.
And that really sort of sent her over the edge, or was one of the first things. And in the actual film or the video, whatever it was that we shot, the CG, there was animation of the pipe coming at the screen and cracking the kid in the head. And marketing, I was sitting there with Kaz Hirai, who was running the whole shindig at the time, and Amy Blair, who was the head of marketing. And Amy was and remains great. I love Amy Blair, but she was like, "That's child-on-child violence." And I'm like, "That's not a thing. You just made that up." It's like there's no thing called child on. You mean kids fighting? Is that a thing now that we have to worry about? But we little things like that. But there wasn't a lot, to Sony's credit, in America at least. There was not a lot that they had issue with. And people are fucking crazy, man. When we did 2012, I remember this. I did a big press event for 2012 in LA, and it was the day that this. I want to say IGN covered it and before the event, and we had released like a trailer that in the trailer showed Sweet Tooth taking the girl who would end up becoming Sweet Chick or Candy Cane or whatever the fuck her name's going to be. And it was his daughter, and he took her and he shoved her up against this door. And then she takes a knife or a scissors and stabs him in the eye. And IGN, for some reason, decided to write that looks rapey. And we're like, okay, what? And Sony was like, we have to be careful. We have to cut away from that shot a lot sooner because people might think it's rapey. I'm like, it's abusive. It's scary. It's mean, but there's no sexual power dynamic thing going on here. He's going to kill her with the big machete. So I don't fucking know. Sometimes it would drive me a little batshit, but mostly they were great.
You're also not writing it in any kind of glorifying way either. Like Sweet Tooth clearly.
Well, no, you're not. But you also, I wouldn't want to be disingenuous and suggest that. Oh no, we try to make it clear Sweet Tooth is a really bad. No, yeah, he is, but he's fun. He's Sweet Tooth, just like Jason, Michael. I'm not gonna lie and act as if. We want people to like, look, you're wearing a shirt, I'm wearing a hat. The guy clearly has some mileage or some ability to go some miles. I want people to like him as a killer. But that said, though, he's not a rapist. Yeah. He'll kill you, but he ain't going to rape you. He's got his standards. Come on now.
Yeah, that probably, usually that doesn't.
He might rape you after you're dead. I don't know. I haven't written that. We'll see.
Well, it's all up to Samoa Joe and Will Arnett now.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. He's somebody else's problem now. You take care of it, PlayStation Productions. Is he a rapist? I don't know.
So one thing that I think is, and probably the most prominent thing to come out of Twisted Metal Black, is Sweet Tooth himself. Because the character had, like as you said before, there's no real canon or continuity to these things unless you played as a specific driver, and then their sole story could be a
is the canon. Yeah.
Right. Like Outlaw, like in one it's the brother, in the next game it's the sister who rescued him from. So like I completely understand that. But being that it is technically a different canon each time, Sweet Tooth was subjected to change time and time again up until Black. And then that kind of became the dominant like Sweet Tooth look. So where did that come from? And like as soon as you made it, were you just like, this is it. This is the character. No need for change. This is what I always wanted.
No, I mean, so it was born out of, like, if you see, I don't know if you can see it that well, but there's a picture behind me from Twisted Metal 2 that shows the truck coming over the hill, and there's Darkseid coming out after him, and it's hard to make out, but Sweet Tooth's head on the truck is anthropomorphized by the great artist and director Lee Wilson, who did all this for us. And it was one of the few times, like at the upper right there, somebody made me, Evan Nixon actually made me an Atari cart for Twisted Metal 1, which is what that is. You probably can't make it out that well, and that was the actual box art. And marketing was the first to say, hey, we should mascot that guy or anthropomorphize that guy because people respond to faces on boxes. And Lee took it the next mile. And then once we went to Black, and we were like, okay, we're either going to do Twisted Metal Road Trip, which was traditional Sweet Tooth with Uncle Sam, and they would go over all America. And I have some concept art for this. It's beautiful from Lee. And they would destroy all these, American relics and all this stuff like, Empire State Building and Seattle Space Needle and all that shit. Or we were going to go dark. And when we decided to go dark, it necessitated a design shift. And it necessitated the idea that this guy was literally a dude who puts a mask on and kills people. And so once we had that, it seemed to connect. And I guess when we came to Twisted Metal 2012, which was the next time we played with it, I think we made a couple of adjustments, but the thought was, that's probably the definitive one. People seem to really like that design. The other guy was just a clown, right? I mean, he doesn't have a lot of, his hair's on fire, but short of that, he's the clown. This gave him a little bit more ownership of his intellectual property, but it wasn't conscious that we were going to make the definitive one. He was just the one that made sense for Black, and I guess we liked him enough to keep him going. I have no idea what he's going to look like in the show. He may look just like the Black version, or he may be totally different. I have no clue.
Let's just hope he doesn't look like he did in Twisted Metal 3.
Let's just hope he doesn't look like he did in the Twisted Metal 3 advertisements. That was the worst. With the fucking little people washing his van and shit. And, oh, God.
And then they kind of went forward with that idea because he has a whole crew of little people in Twisted Metal 4.
Yeah.
But not just the appearance, like the depiction of the character has widely stayed the same from Black, not just like the way that he appears.
I think he found his home when he was a slasher. I think, in one, he is this, if you go back and watch the movies, he's just a guy in clown makeup who's lost his mind a little bit. In two, he literally is, talk about making shit up out of my butthole. I'm like, let's make him a bug in a garden who wants to kill him. What the fuck? That's what he was into. But I think once we said, hey, let's make him like a Freddy Jason type character, suddenly that made sense for him. And I think that's probably why it has stuck around in the various iterations. Not that there have been that many, but the ones that there have been, I think people now look at it. Like even the shirt you're wearing is stylized beyond Sweet Tooth, but it's clearly Sweet Tooth.
Yeah. Whereas
this guy is the one from 2, right? He's a little different. So
it's just interesting that like that what became the icon. It really is like Jason Voorhees in a way, because what became iconic about that character, like the definitive look of that character, came like later on in the series run. There was 4 installments before like Sweet Tooth was down pat.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, we didn't really work on 3 and 4, but for us, it was the 3rd one. And by that time, it was a blend of Martin Mercer's art and Cecil Kim's art. And Cecil was one of the lead concept guys on God of War and 2. And, He's gone on to some amazing concept work since then. But I think those two are the ones that really were able to kind of nail it and get it to a point that I think now that's what Sweet Tooth is.
Well, that's actually like kind of...
And there was a whole story about his mask and everything. We just haven't gotten to tell it yet. So, and we probably never will. I mean, either the show's going to tank and it'll bury Twisted Metal as a property within Sony. Maybe I'd be able to get $1 million and then they'd say, fuck it, no one's using it, go make your slasher movie. Or it's going to fly, and they're going to own the official canon, I would imagine, at that point. And, you know, I hope it's the latter, but I don't fucking know. But, yeah, there were definitely there was more backstory to him that we haven't gotten around to. That's for sure.
It's kind of, like, identical to Jason in that way, because it was your third outing with the character, and it was Jason Voorhees' third outing.
Jason I thought it was the second one you put on the mask, not the third one.
No, he showed up in the second one. He had the sack over his face.
Oh, he had the sack, and then the third one he had the mask.
The third one was the iconic hockey mask, which
and then Corey Feldman came in with the fourth one.
Yeah.
Right. Without the hair or something.
And then he was recast twice over, that character.
Yeah. What's his name? Like Tommy something.
Tommy Jarvis.
Yeah, Tommy Jarvis. That's right.
You got Tommy Jarvis for Friday, and you got Tommy Doyle for Halloween.
There you go.
The Curse of Paul Rudd. Was there any specific reason that the Sweet Tooth mask appeared in Dollface's backstory, or was that just like an Easter egg?
Oh, well, it was the assumption that Jeff had was that Creel, you know, he made it. You know, we liked, like I said, we liked that. We liked the Preacher story intersected Tooth story, and Tooth intersected. That's where the mask came from. And there might have been one or two other things I'd have to go back and watch to suggest how all that tied together. But again, there was nothing magical about it. Like, oh yeah, there was this thing. It was just, Jeff was probably like, oh, wouldn't that be cool if Creel made the mask? Because he makes all this other shit. And I'm like, oh, cool. All right. And I went home. I mean, it was really, I wish it was more, you know, but it turned out great. I had forgotten about that, but I think it makes all the sense in the world that this guy in that story makes these horrible masks that somehow, when you put them on, you know, bring out these awful parts of the person wearing the mask. But that wasn't conscious. But boy, that's neat.
So, okay, so now directly for specific characters, the character of Black.
Of Black, yeah.
Yeah. Was that a modernized version of the demon from the first Twisted Metal? Was that like an attempt at Mr. Ash?
It was. I don't even remember. We had the truck that came first that I think was called Manslaughter or something. I don't remember what the truck was called. And we knew we didn't have the budget to make a full-on story. And I think just kind of the gimpy S&M mask, because of Pulp Fiction had kind of become popularized, and it was in some of Joel Peter Witkin's corpse photography as well. That was sort of, it was its own thing. It never occurred to us that I mean, we had Black in Twisted Metal 1.
Yeah.
Who, come on now. I mean, that's horrible. That's just, I mean, it was like a 6-foot Hell's Angel biker wearing a black drape and a piece of styrofoam over his head that had some bicycle lights in it. And he just went like, oh, it's so bad. Like we would, if it was the first season of Doctor Who, they would have said no to that. It was terrible. But other than that, though, this was just, we liked the, you know, again, I don't, you know, certainly Marvel and certainly us, we're not the people to invent the multiverse, but it was around as a concept. And the idea that, hey, what would Black be like in this world compared to that world, I thought was interesting. But there's no real connective tissue like, oh, well, you see, he's the ancestor. No,
okay.
Nothing.
I also noticed in the deleted scenes that I found, maybe, worst case scenario, maybe we should put them on and try to watch through some of them, because I was unaware that you didn't see the scenes since they've gotten leaked. I thought that you for sure would have seen them. But in the deleted scenes for Black wasn't speaking. It was like an unknown narrator on his behalf.
Well, were they scenes or cards? I don't even know if we had...
They were the animated moving pictures a little bit.
Okay, and so there was a narrator talking about him, and in the one that we shipped, there was a actor being Black?
I think for Black it was like You know, like somebody just doing like a Christopher Nolan Batman impression.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, let me see.
I mean, a lot. I mean, the takeaway from it is, I think, and I don't mean that like, oh, I don't know, sorry, you get no answer. I think it's
that's helpful.
I think it's more the takeaway is it's been a long time, but more important, a lot of this stuff just kind of. It's not. I can't speak to any other production. Like if you were to interview somebody from another game that has a level of story like Black or more, they might think it is sacred work, you know, to be like, oh well, let me tell you the reason behind that. And I'm not being flip about it. I'm saying the way I worked was, if I have ADD. And I don't mean that like it's an excuse, but if I got a hit of dopamine when I came up with an idea or heard an idea that I thought was cool, I was like, the player will probably get the same hit. Let's move on with our fucking lives. I'm not going to worry about explaining it right now. So as to Black having a voice or a narrator, you put a gun to my head. I could not remember why we ended up making the decision we made. I mean, you're making 100 decisions a day. So. I'm sure there was a reason. I just don't know what it was.
Well, I'm gonna actually. This is just for your viewing pleasure. I'm gonna send you the.
Yeah, refresh my memory. I haven't seen. I was unaware anything had been released.
Oh, you know what? I'm pretty sure I could bring it up here if I wanted to.
Yeah, let's put it up.
Hold on. Yes, I can. All right, hold on. Here we go. I just need to make sure that the audience can see with us. What happened? Having a slight issue here. Oh. Just my luck. Can you currently hear me?
I can hear you and I can see the Billy Ray intro scene, but it's not playing right now.
Oh, okay. So for some reason, I don't think anyone else can see, but that's fine. I'm just gonna play. Let's get to Black.
I was so proud of him. He was like a son to me. Now I would have my revenge. But no one was there. I was so naive to think it would be this easy. And my poor Black, it was a trap. At first, I thought it was over. All of my dreams dashed, ruined. My family's death still unavenged. But then, there was hope. I knew I had made him strong enough. Black was alive, and as long as we still had Black, we still had a chance to bring down Calypso. Next year, next contest. That's when we'll make our move.
Yeah, I mean, that's clearly footage that was probably cut by us with just somebody in the office doing the dialogue just to figure out if it worked or something. I mean, we would have known that was not like a professional voice actor.
I got that much.
Yeah. So my guess on that one is maybe when we saw it, because I don't remember how it actually ultimately finished. I know we used all the footage, but I know he's saying like, but Calypso, where did you go? And all that stuff. I think he was made to kill. I don't fucking know. It's been ages, man.
I'm sorry to have brought that back up. I just wanted to show you what I was.
I don't mind. No, I was curious to see. Yeah, I think that's where that came from. I don't know where all this stuff came from. Though.
Yeah, this is also where like a lot of the names are here as well, like Raven, aka Sad Sally. It's where I got a good chunk of some of the information about the behind the scene, about the unused material, and also where I saw the full original Dollface story as well. So. I'm gonna send that to you in DM as well. There's one other thing about the unused material. Actually, there was a cutscene that's not attached to this, but I found somewhere else, of Axel coming out of Blackfield Asylum.
Okay.
And he didn't have like a story like that, so I was wondering if like there was a point in development where he was intended to be one of the patients.
How did we end up using Axel's story? You could play Axel, and what was his ending? Oh, his wife. He got Cage killed his wife or something.
Sweet Tooth killed his wife.
Sweet Tooth killed his wife. Yeah, I couldn't tell you. I mean, it could have been a marketing promotional shot. It could have been part of the actual story. I don't recall.
Hold on, let me see if this is yeah, there's no audio attached to it.
Well, I mean, so this is one of those budgetary things, right? So we, every intro, and I don't remember if Axel had an intro, but he clearly had the end movie. We sent the animators the cars and said, we need the same shot, same camera angle with the car coming out of Blackfield, because that was the beginning of every car's story. So either that existed because we had planned a much deeper Axel story, like a 3-act structure, and we had to cut it, or because we were like, well, we know we're not going to get a deep Axel story, but we still have to follow that pattern just because that's how the game flows. He's got to have some piece of footage that plays. I don't remember. But that's probably what it was from. It was definitely now seeing it is what that was from.
You mentioned before that Mr. Creel from Dollface's story was a joke on the game Warhawk.
Yeah.
And there was also a Warhawk present in Twisted Metal Black as well.
Yes.
Was that character ever intended to be playable?
I want to say no, but people have since told me that they've seen it playable, or you can find something on the disc. So knowing Scott, knowing Kellen, and knowing the guys out in Utah, it wouldn't surprise me if they were trying to make it playable, but they didn't want to promise anything to Sony, and I worked at and for Sony. I wasn't out there in Utah, and maybe they just didn't have the time to get it in, like as a functional thing, so it stayed in the code. But it was, and I'm sure from time to time we talked about it, and maybe we did more than talk about it, but it never made it in any meaningful build of the game that we were like, this is going to happen. So maybe what it was is we had planned on it, and I had done on my end, we had gotten the footage of not the footage, but the shot of the pilot and all this shit for the cards that are still on the disc, but we never got around to doing it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, especially with, you told me previously that there was kind of like a little bit of a crunch for time, so the animations had to change, and
yeah.
So I would imagine like trying to bring a helicopter into a game that was originally just made for, cars, it would be a completely different mechanic.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been. I mean, those guys had already done something similar when they left Sony's publishing deal. They went off and made a game called Road Trip, and they also made Critical Depth, and I want to say both of those. I mean, obviously Critical Depth because it's a submarine game had verticality, but I think even in Rogue Trip there was a point where you could unlock a UFO that had verticality, and so I don't think it was never probably meant to be anything more than a secret that you could unlock and have fun with. It was never really meant to be like, okay, this has to be balanced to work perfectly with the rest of the game. It was probably more just like an Easter egg or something, but I don't know.
So, back to the, which I'm probably going to have a couple questions about this, but the game's quote-unquote twist that wasn't, built into it initially. The whole, this is all in Sweet Tooth's head. Mm-hmm. When it says that, I think on the original Sweet Tooth character selection screen, when it's telling you about the patients and what they suffer from and whatnot, was insomnia thrown in there to imply that that's why Marcus kind of exists? Like, Sweet Tooth is the dominant personality when he sleeps, and when he doesn't sleep, so he's mostly awake.
I want to say Jeff or Paul Jenkins wrote the folders. Mm-hmm. It's a nice idea, and it wouldn't surprise me, given that Jeff is an actual real writer and Paul is certainly an actual real writer, that they did that creative work and thought that was a good idea. But if that was the case, it never was pitched to me that way. But I think it's a good idea.
Okay, that is actually very helpful. Here's a much more simple one. How does No Face see?
Not well. I mean, it's fantasy, right? How does Sweet Tooth run around with his head on fire? How does...
well, he was cursed by a preacher. Haven't you played the game?
I have, yeah. There is no smart answer. There's two answers. There's the smart answer, which is it's a dark fantasy fairy tale, and in that, in order for the metaphor takes precedent over the literal, and in that, we don't worry about it. That's sort of the smarty pants, arty farty answer. It's true, but the other answer that's true is I was at a museum in LA. I saw a photograph of a woman who had basically sewn her eyes and mouth shut, and I thought it was creepy. And I went to Jeff and I said, I'm going to do that. And he wrote a story around it with me and Martin, and I never stopped to give a fuck. I just thought she was cool looking. Like, I mean, but both answers are valid and both answers are accurate. I think there's a reason my 20-something-year-old self thought it was cool looking and it resonated with me. And I do think that's because there is something metaphorical and there is something meaningful about a character like that. But I didn't do the digging and the work to understand the theme of it. I just knew it resonated. And so because it resonated and creeped me out, it went in the game. But it's a similar thing to, like, if you're Jason Voorhees, why the fuck are you wearing a hockey mask? Like, it's cutting off your peripheral vision. You'd probably scare the fuck out of people more showing them your face. Why? I mean, seriously, why is there? Maybe they've answered it, but why does he wear a mask? Why does Michael Myers wear a mask? You kind of go, dude, who gives a shit? It's not like you're like Solid Snake trying to be covert and sneak around. But because I think there is something scary about. Did you see episode 6 of? Oh, you haven't watched Obi-Wan yet?
No, not yet.
You're talking about masks, man. That episode 6, talk about giving kids nightmares. There's some good imagery in that episode, but yeah, I don't know. I think it was probably just because metaphorically, emotionally, it connected with me, and I never really gave it the time of day as to why functionally.
I mean, it makes sense. Twisted Metal is a very visual medium, so it makes sense that would demand priority over everything else.
Yeah, but I mean, even saying that demand priority suggests there's some thought behind it. Like, well, this is the priority. We have it written on the whiteboard. We always have to put visual. It was just, I was like, that's cool. Right. And I'm not saying, I bring it up because I'm not trying to be flip. Like, because I know there's a narrative you can spin about that, like, oh, look at these silly people thinking it's serious, and Jaffe's just like, I just fucking pulled it out my butt. There really is there is part of that. There is part of that sloppiness, but there's also, I do think there is, there's something, and not that Twist Metal Black has a monopoly on this. I think any creative work does, but there's something primal, I think, about horror when it works. And for me, it hasn't been necessary when I was working on that game to fully understand what's under the floorboards. I just knew what was under the floorboards was creepy as fuck. And I thought that was cool. But I think it's not just a flip answer. I do think it reflects the nature of creating in horror in one way, which is you really just kind of get in touch with that and let it do its thing.
So No Face specifically was on like a lot of the marketing. Like he was on the disc. I think his journal entries were in the manual.
How did he write them? It's like that's very, yeah.
I was gonna ask, was he intended to be like the breakout star of Black?
No, I don't know why they put his face on the disc. That's more marketing. In terms of the marketing department, you wouldn't have seen it until after you had bought the game. I'm trying to think. The journal, I wrote the journal, I think. Either Paul did or I did. I think I wrote it. And maybe we picked him, I don't know, maybe because out of all the characters, he was the least crazy. And so we could write in his voice in a way, because the manual also was telling you how to play the game. And if you're writing that like Bloody Mary, maybe we couldn't be true to that voice and still be practical and go like, here's how a homing missile works. But I don't really remember.
That makes sense. Jeez. Was it initially, like, I know that a couple things were cut toward the end. Was Minion ever intended to have any sort of like a story, like, or an ending, a climax of some kind? Or just the loading screens, were they always the primary way of telling the story?
Minion is wearing the moose head or
Marcus Kane, yeah. No spoilers, sorry guys.
He's the one that is written in code, right?
Yes.
So you're asking, was he ever meant to be more than that?
Yeah, like
No. That was in fact Minion. I guess Minion was playable and unlockable, if I remember, which was maybe a surprise to us because his vehicle's so big. That I assume probably what happened was Scott was like, hey, we can do this if you want to. What do you guys think? And we were like, yeah, let's do it. And then it was like, fuck, let me come up with a story and a character for this. So he was very late in the process of deciding he was going to go in that game.
So
as a playable, anyway.
Yeah, and the playable version of the characters is also significantly smaller than the.
I'm sure, yeah.
So I'm sure that's how they were able to do it. In terms of Raven, canonically speaking, were her and her friend Kelly supposed to be platonic? Because 2001 was. Okay, I didn't think so, but I wanted to get that clear because.
No, they were lesbians.
Yeah, it was a different point in time. You couldn't just come out and say that.
No, that wasn't the case. It just never made it. I mean, it wasn't really part of the story. They were together, and we see that, but it wasn't. It didn't seem. It never occurred to anybody to call it out, not for any reason. Just like it's obvious they're together. But I don't think anyone would have. I mean, hell, we had a couple of gay characters in Jet Moto, and that was way earlier than Black. So I don't think it was anything like, oh, it's not the time for it. It was probably just we just assumed what the story was worked, and no one ever really thought about it.
Yeah, didn't need to call explicit attention to it.
Yeah, it was like wasn't on our minds.
This is a very stupid question.
Cool.
And I'm pretty sure I already know the answer is no, but I'm gonna ask it. Was Raven meant to be a replacement of Mortimer? Or like, was she made from that same mold?
Well, I mean, she drives the same car.
Yeah.
Mortimer's probably, if not my favorite, one of my favorite all-time Twisted Metal characters. I just love the art that Lee did on him, and he's very Charles Dickens-like in terms of the characters Charles Dickens wrote about. Mm-hmm. But no, I think for her, we just, it was more of like turning Sweet Tooth into what Sweet Tooth was. It was like, if Twisted Metal was real, what kind of people would drive these things? Who would drive a hearse? Oh, a girl who's into goth and all the kind of emo shit. It didn't occur to us to keep Mortimer, he's so comic booky that I think we felt that it made more sense to have an emo kid who steals a hearse and enters a competition. Seems to be more of this world, I guess.
There were some aspects of Agent Stone and John Doe's backstories that seemed to be still present in the final cut, but like largely edited down. I think similar to what we just talked about with Raven, it was there, but it wasn't necessarily emphasized or like outward spoken of. But like I think there were a lot of like racial elements to the character's backstory. Obviously, John Doe was in a white supremacist gang, and I think Agent Stone's background was it that his family was killed by neo-Nazis or something like that? Or
if I don't remember that, it wouldn't surprise me that I wrote that somewhere, but I don't remember. All I remember is his story is he's on the roof, he's a cop. Mm-hmm. He's dealing with this situation with the sniper rifle. I think he thinks he saved everybody, and then he kind of looked away a little bit too soon. And when he came back up, John Doe wasn't quite dead and killed him with a headshot. I don't remember ever delving. It may be there, but if it is, I don't remember where that would be in the story. Maybe a throwaway line of dialogue or something.
There's also a fan theory that the person that Agent Stone shoots is Calypso, which I didn't understand. Why? I think because of the perspective, like it's so far away that it kind of looks like he could have a sunken in eye. I have no idea. The models do look significantly different, and also I'm pretty sure Calypso's not like a white supremacist. So
yeah, no. Wait. Are you saying that the shooter is Calypso, or Agent Stone is Calypso?
Agent Stone, who he shoots, and gets up and shoots him back. The terrorist.
Agent Stone. Is the black SWAT guy.
Yes.
So you're saying Agent Stone looks like Calypso, or John Doe looks like Calypso?
I think they were saying that John Doe looks like Calypso.
Okay. Now that makes a little bit more sense. I love that idea. I would love to take credit for that, because we definitely do that in 2012, where it turns out that the guy who traps Dollface in the mask is in fact Calypso, and he's out there setting up these things that ultimately he has to be the guy that they come to save them. But no, that was not the intention, but I like that. That's cool.
I also like that you were, in 2013, I watched, because I used to religiously watch your YouTube channel before I ever started speaking to you and having you on mine. Mm-hmm. I watched you put out all the deleted scenes or the cut scenes from 2013.
Yeah.
And I believe that one of them was that Preacher was actually still in Blackfield Asylum.
Oh, well, no, at the end. So what happened was Preacher was still trying to bring down Calypso, and at the end, he thought he had, but it was clear that Calypso, who's basically Satan, is like, you have zero ability to do shit, motherfucker. And so his greatest attempt to kill Calypso had basically almost literally blown up in his face, and he's just dejected and lost. And Calypso's like, hey, I know a great place for you. a lot of time to sit and ponder and pray, and he puts them in. He puts them in Blackfield Asylum in one of the endings, but in the actual ending that we shipped with, he is living inside a painting in Calypso's office. So he's in one of these mini cages that Calypso puts people in that try to stop him, and they get they're trapped inside this painting that's on his wall with all the other Twisted Metal prizes and relics and all that shit. But in one of the stories, yes, he was going to end up in Blackfield Asylum.
Why were you able to get away with calling, like, you didn't have to call attention in 2013 that he wasn't in fact a preacher? Like, had things just changed by that point in time, or was there any specific reason?
Ultimately the movie of Preacher never got far enough. You know, he had a lot more that we didn't put in the ship game. But I don't know if we ever call him Preacher. I don't know if we ever acknowledge what he is. And so probably if the powers that be ever saw it, they would have said, well, he's fine. Right? It's not like he's like, I'm here in the name of Jesus Christ. That probably would have sent up a red flag for somebody. Because it's just cool. But I don't think anything I think there's less religious discussion in 2012 than there is in Black.
There was a scrapped sequel?
Yes.
Do you remember any of, like, if there were any creative... No.
I didn't work on it. So I was working on God of War while they were working on Harbor City, is what the sequel is, at least.
Oh, they were going to do it entirely without you.
Well, yeah, it wasn't like a slight. It was, they had been purchased by Sony, and I said, hey, okay, I want to do internal development. I want to do this thing called God of War. So they're like, okay, we're going to go do this. And it really wasn't on my... there may have been opportunities to be involved, but I was so in the trenches on God of War that I was like, I don't care. Do it. I don't really want to think about it. If there were even those opportunities, I don't remember. But
no, I meant it in the sense that I'm surprised. Like, I would have thought that, being that the most successful Twisted Metal games created, your name is, like, more pertinently attached to. You would think that...
You know, it just doesn't work that way. As much as the press wants to write about video game creators that way, the real stars of the video game industry are the brands, which is why Twisted Metal 3 outsold Twisted Metal 2. And I think even to this day, Twisted Metal 3 is probably the best-selling Twisted Metal of all time, because the brand of Twisted Metal had come along from 1 and 2, and 2 was so beloved that everybody just bought 3 sight unseen. And by the time 4 came around, the reputation had been tarnished because of 3, and 4 is decidedly a better game than 3. But I think also Car Combat really had its moment in the sun at a gameplay level, and people were kind of moving on to more sophisticated ways of moving around the space in a 3D shooter, that they were, you know, as much as Sony wants to tell you it's about art, and I'm sure it is to a degree, 99% of the purchasers, at least at the level of a $60, $50, whatever game, are not buying it because I or Kojima or Ken Levine or Miyamoto or any of these names that you may know worked on it. They're buying it because it's like Mario, I know that. And that's just the way it is. And so I don't think they were like actively trying to convince me not to be involved, but I was busy with something else, and they were like, okay, well, they want to make this. Okay, let's go.
So there was never any, like, from your part, on your part as a creator, when you were doing Twisted Metal Black, there was never any, like, personal ideas like, oh, here's where we could take it if we did a sequel to it? Like, it was just on to the next thing, kind of?
I'm trying to remember. By the time Black rolled around, by the time we were in alpha of that game, I was absolutely decided on I was going to do internal development with the Connecticut team. And so I finished Black. I came on Connecticut to help for about 4 or 5 months, and then it was on to what ultimately became God of War. So There may have been a discussion here or there about a sequel. I don't know, but it was never anything. I didn't wrap up Black and go, oh, I know I'm going to do this internal thing, but man, I have such a... No, there was never anything like that. It was done.
Where does it, like, overall, like, as a product for you, like, where does Twisted Metal rank in terms of, like, the Twisted Metal games for you?
Well, like I said, I think it's the best expression of the Twisted Metal IP. Mm-hmm. Like, it's the best world building. It's a wonderful world. The characters are cool. I think it plays probably number 3. The best playing is number 2, and the deepest is 2012. But I would say all 3 of those really are my favorites for various reasons. I think, 3 and 4, I don't really know much about and work on. 1, I think we needed to go to 1 to get to 2. But I think 1, other than its nostalgic charm, is virtually unplayable. So. Who
were your personal favorite characters to work on in Twisted Metal specifically?
In Black?
Yeah.
Preacher I loved because I hate him, but I loved him because I grew up in Alabama and I hated all that kind of, power that religion still to this day, as we see in America, has over people. I liked, I liked Sweet Tooth. I liked Preacher. I liked I forget the names, but I liked the cab driver who was the remote controlled dad.
Charlie Kane and Son.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. They're all little parts of you, just like they're parts of Jeff and Martin and Paul Jenkins. I mean, I think Bloody Mary is such a cliche that she might as well not exist. I mean, there's nothing about her, that I think is fascinating, whereas I think someone like Raven is substantially more interesting, of a character. So yeah, they're all, it's cliche to say, but they are all like kids or, distant cousins at this point. And so you love them all in their own way, but it's weird I had anything to do with it. Let's just put it that way. It's weird. Anything that, all of those games seem like a different life, somebody else's life, right? So I'm looking at your backdrop, I'm looking at your shirt, I'm looking at my hat, some of the stuff in the background. I know I worked on this series. I remember where I was when I came up with certain things. But my experience with the creative process is that these things really do take on their own life, and to such a degree that they feel like no longer part of you. Like they're just out there and you're like aware of them. But I don't know, it's weird. I have always struggled with how to feel about the stuff I've been involved in creating. I don't mean like, do I feel good about it? Of course I feel good about it. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the team. I'm proud of Sony for publishing these things. But it's probably like a butterfly effect thing, right? Like I can go to my car and honk my horn, and that could set a ripple effect off that causes someone to be murdered 2 continents away. Literally, right? I mean, that happens. That probably happens all the time. But that's what sort of releasing your creative product to the world does, at least for me, is like, I don't understand it once it's done. It goes out, it affects people, it makes people happy, makes people angry, makes people bored, whatever. And all I can do is kind of watch from the distance and go, oh yeah, that was one of those things I worked on. But it's a very weird relationship I have with whether it's a failure like Drawn to Death or a hit like Black or a hit like God of War. They just feel like you had them for a moment. Maybe it's like raising kids. You birthed them, you raised them, and it's nice when they call, but they're out there doing their thing. It's weird. I'm not trying to romanticize it. I really sometimes struggle to remember that I had anything to do with it. Like the fact that right now there are people on a movie set or a TV set in New Orleans. Or there are people furiously pounding away on scripts and casting of the God of War TV series that would not exist if it wasn't for me waking up one day and saying, I want to find a team to create this with. I want to sell this. I want to convince the powers that be that I'm the guy to give the money to. You just forget all that. And these things are out there, and it's very strange. I don't know. And you're like, Jaffe, I just asked you which characters you like.
No. I love all of this. I would much rather you give me an in-depth, actual, meaningful answer than I guess I like the clown. That's always going to mean more to me.
No, but I'm giving you an honest answer because it is a very unusual relationship. And I would wonder, I should ask some other creators, like, how do you feel? How does, I don't talk to him all that often. I talk to him a couple times a year. I should ask Ken Levine. It's like, how do you feel about the fact that that, the big daddies and BioShock and all, how do you feel that's out there? Does he ever think about it? Or even Corey, the new Kratos is an invention of Corey, not me. I wonder, I know that he knows that it has so much love from a lot of people, but does he even think about it? Or is he just like, oh yeah, that's that thing I did, and now I'm all focused on this? And I don't know. I've never thought to ask another creative, but I should. I'd be curious.
Are there any characters that you think, like from Black specifically, that you think you could have gotten more usage out of? Like, are there any characters that you're like, hey, I could have done this with that, or do you think they all just exist in that one game for that?
Well, reason? I think Sweet Tooth, like I said, Sweet Tooth in the world of video games is a pretty extraordinary character. I think in the world of movies, he's a relatively cliche, straight-to-video slasher, right? But I do think there's enough there in his visual iconography that a good group of writers could come together and go, this guy could be more than a knockoff Freddy Jason, right? So I definitely think him. I think Preacher. I think Calypso's relationship with the world is worth discussing in other ways. I think Mortimer fascinates me in some ways. So yeah, there's some Dollface. Yeah.
And as a follow-up to that question, are there any characters from the other Twisted Metal games that have existed in their own Twisted Metal canon that you think would be a good transition into the world of Twisted Metal Black specifically?
I don't know a lot of them. I don't remember a lot of the characters that aren't the main canon characters from things like Head On or 3 or 4 or even Small Brawl. We had a character in Twisted Metal Head On the Lost levels called Headless Hal, which I think might be a little too far for Twisted Metal Black. He literally was decapitated in a car race, but he was like the Headless Horseman. He was going around without a head. That might have worked wonders in 2, but Black, it might have been a little too goofy. But I liked that character a lot. Yeah, I don't know. Nothing comes to mind.
Is there I've heard, because I did listen to other people's interviews with you just because I wanted to make sure I wasn't treading the same exact waters that you're used to every interview.
Yeah.
But I've actually heard you say a little bit like not necessarily negative, but like almost like disappointment in Black to some degree. Specifically with the gameplay. Yeah.
I think the gameplay is way too fucking fast, is what I think. I think it's too hard and it moves too fast. And we were so jazzed that we could do 60 frames and make it smooth as butter that we had not, again, it's really, I think about this a lot because I'm a fan of Game Pass on Xbox, but I'm exceptionally critical of their production work that they do in terms of they just haven't seemed to really get their heads around how to make wonderful first-party titles. But I remember, what's funny about Sony is Sony didn't have a lot of competition at the time. So we could make mistakes in broad daylight and no one complained, right? But when you look at it now and you go, Twisted Metal Black was never play tested. It was us in the office going, that seems about right. That's, and we didn't have any experience within Sony, really. We were all the first group that was learning this. We were there before there was PlayStation. Going, there's this thing where if you're developing the game or producing the game or whatever your role is, if you're very familiar with it, you're the last person that should be making tuning decisions in the vacuum, because you've spent 2 to 3 years getting the muscle memory of the button layout, how the AI works, and all this subtle shit that you can't even articulate, that you just know at a subconscious level, that a player coming to it new is going to have no idea. And so I think my issue with Black was that we didn't know what we didn't know, and what I wish we would have known is, hey, you're making a product for a lot of people, and we could have sold a lot more copies if we would have been a more friendly single-player game. But, that would be my only disappointment.
Is there anything else, like, specifically that really stands out to you about what, even from the creative side or the, like, down to making the game itself? Like, is there anything that stands out to you about your time making Twisted Metal Black?
The one thing that I always, and I don't know why this memory was one of the handful of the making of this that stuck with me. But I remember I was out in Utah and I was talking to Alan Becker, who went on to run Japan but ran Sony Santa Monica and was at Sony, like, one of the very first Sony video game employees ever before PlayStation. And I know that there were some complaints coming about the violence or some of the stories, and I don't remember what they were specifically, but I remember saying to him, having one of those moments where it's like, look, I don't really care if I get fired over this. I'm fighting for this, and you can do what you want, but if Sony wants me to accept this and take what they're saying and I'm not doing that. So they can change it if they want, but don't look to me to change this because I believe in it too much. So I remember that, but no, nothing like a specific story other than what we've already talked about.
Okay. We have just a couple of questions from the people watching.
Okay.
So I'm going to fire them off. What is something, graphics, game mechanic, guest characters, for example, that we can do now that you wish could have been implemented back then when you were making this game?
Well, I think, like I said, play testing has come a long way. The knowledge and awareness of the necessity of it has come a long way. So that certainly, I wish play testing, once we hit alpha and maybe even before, would have directed some of our decisions better than it did, because we didn't do it at all. I would have liked to, I probably would have figured out a way, or worked harder to figure out how to address the color palette similarity, because on one hand it fit the tone perfectly, everything being gray and dark and depressing, but it prevented 95% of the levels from looking different enough to feel like you had a new level loaded. Technically, I mean, they're not, I guess I don't really know if in a game like this, getting out of the car, which we probably could have maybe done in that game, it would be a lot easier to do today. I don't really know if that would have made it a better game. I think it always feels like that would be a better game, because, oh, isn't that a cool fantasy? It's like, yeah, but then it becomes something very, very different, and it may not be what people want. So that's what I'd say.
Does Twisted Metal Black deserve a remaster, remake, or sequel? Why or why not?
I mean, deserve? I mean, are there fans of it? There's a very simple answer to that, which is depending on the number of fans I'm not sure what the formula would be, but you have to take into account the number of fans, the cost it would cost, and how much profit Sony wants to make before something becomes worth it. I think fundamentally the world of Twisted Metal is still very rich. And I think the world of Black is still exceptionally rich. So does Sony have the potential to do something, whether it's in PlayStation Productions or a graphic novel or a game with a different genre? I think there's something there worth exploring if the budget is right. But I don't think straight up car combat. I mean, you know, you look at something like Grand Theft Auto. I mean, it used to be car combat was all you had in that genre. Now Grand Theft Auto is like there's 1,000 things you can do, and one of them happens to be car combat. And then you can get out of a car and you can go work out at the gym, and then you can go rob a nightclub. I mean, it's like, unless you have a lot more to bring to moment vehicle combat design, I would say the days of decent budget car combat games, correctly so, are over. There are moments where I think I have an idea of how to make it really cool again, but you know, audiences are used to being able to jump and climb and sidestep and run and slide, and you know, they have a range of motion and shooters now that you just don't really get in a vehicle. And once the fantasy wears off of you being in Mad Max, it's hard to recognize why you would want to deal with the limits of being in a car while having a gunfight versus being on foot and having a gunfight. So I would say probably not.
What was the biggest struggle you had to get through with this game, and how did you overcome it? It's an interesting question.
I mean, it was hard to work on. It wasn't one of the hardest games. You know, I mean, probably the hardest struggle was going to my good friend at the time and to this day, Jeff, and saying, we're going to replace you with someone else, because you won't let go of this fantasy that this is going to be a full animated thing, and we can't do it. And so having to basically fire a really good friend of mine was hard. But it wasn't like a God of War game where the production was just a slog for well over a year. It was cool. I mean, it was fun to work with the guys. It was fun to work with Jeff and Martin, and I thought it was a fun experience.
Somebody asks, what would Kratos drive in Twisted Metal?
He would probably drive like some kind of American muscle car. I mean, obviously, it's a chariot, you know, but he would probably, if he had to pick a car, it would probably, I don't know much about cars, but like sort of one of those, like a modern day Mustang, or just something really fucking beefy and loaded, or maybe a monster truck. I don't know.
Are there any vehicles that you wanted to put in Twisted Metal that you didn't get to use?
We always wanted to get a gangster like 1920s with running boards and Tommy guns and all that. Never got around to it. I always wanted a parade float in the game as one of the cars, which I just thought would be a blast. But we always struggled with size, like how to make it functional and not a boss, but make it fit the levels. Let's see. There's probably a couple more. We always toyed with a go-kart, but it always came off as too wacky. So here and there, a couple, yeah.
Whose story in Twisted Metal Black would you consider to be best for a live-action adaptation?
Like a full movie of one story?
I guess so.
I mean, I'd watch a movie about the preacher, I guess. It would have Sweet Tooth in it, but I think out of all the characters, you know, the idea of I find religion very creepy, and the idea of someone that dogmatic about it to the point that it drives him insane, I think there's something kind of cool about that and dark and interesting. So I would probably want to see something happen with him.
A question I've been wondering for years is, why did Minion drive a tanker truck in Twisted Metal Black?
Because the tanker truck came first, and we knew we needed a Minion that felt like it made sense in black. So we knew that Minion from 1 and 2 was a little too fantasy, and so somehow out of all the vehicles we looked at, the tanker truck kind of seemed like that would be Black's version of Minion. And then from there, we just needed to put a character in it, and it was like, well, that S&M mask is creepy, and it's kind of, like I said, tied into Pulp Fiction, and people know what the GIMP thing is and all that now. So it wasn't like a nice marriage of course we would put this guy in that. It was just like, well, we need a creepy character. We're out of time. This is what the car is. Who do you want to drive it? Right.
I'm going through them because some of them I feel like you already answered.
Sure.
Like this one, just wants to know about the character Black from Twisted Metal Black. Ask why he wears the mask, who he is, what his story is with Calypso. But I feel like you already.
It was a mask. He had a cool mask, man, and then we wrote a story around it. I mean, that was it.
See, but I really enjoy that some of these stories are that simplistic. It's just, I thought it looked cool, and apparently so did everyone else. You want to know more, right? I think that's...
Yeah, I mean, and like I said earlier, I don't mean that in a flip way. I think there is a reason that looks cool. There's a reason that guy who asked that question to that girl wants to know that, because maybe at some level that character resonated, good or bad. And there is a subconscious reason we choose things when we do creative work. I don't have a conscious answer for that.
There is a story out there. We just don't know it right now. Somebody asks, what did you dislike about Twisted Metal 3 and 4?
Well, I didn't play them enough. Like, here's what I'll tell you. The biggest thing that I took away from both those games is they did not feel like Twisted Metal games. They may have been fine car combat games for what they were, but for me, there is and again, I could be drinking my own Kool-Aid, and that's fine, and that's probable, but when I think about Twisted Metal, even 2, which was wacky as fuck, there was still a darkness to it. There was still a bit of a sinister aspect, too, that I think the people who made 3 and 4, amazing developers, made those games in insanely fast amounts of time, did great business for Sony, kept the brand alive, but I don't think, for me, they understood Twisted Metal. I think they saw the wacky part of it, and they're like, oh, Twisted Metal, it's crazy, it's zany, it's wacky, it's oh no, those crazy kids. And I think it was very surface without any of the nutritional value of the disturbing and the horrific and the surreal, right? So I didn't like that about those games. But I think the other thing is, they were trying to bolt it on to at least 3, the Rallycross engine, which is like, these cars are not meant to drive like cars. They look like cars, but it's an arena shooter. It is not a driving game. There was just some fundamental things that I don't think they understood, that I get why they wouldn't, because we didn't understand them. We had to make them and go, oh shit, you want to have the cars turn in the air, for example? Well, that doesn't make any sense. It's like, yeah, I know, but you spend so much time in the air, you should give the player some control, something to do. Okay, let's do it. Oh, that's much better, right? Just, you don't know until you know. And I think they were coming off of Rallycross, which was much more physics-based. And so I didn't like that. Yeah, I didn't play them that much, though. I've played them both for about 2 hours tops each. And that's cool. I'm good. So...
yeah, see, like I said, my first introduction to Twisted Metal was 4. So as that entry ramp into what the series actually is, like for my personal experience, I thought that was a nice prelude to what I would like really come to know and love. But
Yeah.
had I been with the series since 1 and then went down to 3 and 4, I think I would have probably been highly disappointed in.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that the game that the Single Track guys went off to make, which was Road Trip, is a much better vehicle combat game. But it, as Kelly Flock, who ran the whole thing, said, it didn't have the brand. And the brand really, at least in this space of the video game industry, is everything.
So I don't know if there's actually an answer to this question, or it's just best left up to the interpretation of the people who play the game. But is there a resounding answer as to if Black does or doesn't take place solely in Sweet Tooth's mind?
I mean, I don't know if there's an answer. I mean, clearly, I guess you can interpret it one of two ways. You can interpret it like what, what's the guy's name? John Doe is saying, or who is it? Minion's driver is who?
Minion's the driver. It's the war tank thing.
I don't know. The guy the guy who has the secret code, whoever that is. Minion, yeah. You could look at it and say that he's crazy and he's just kind of like one of the many crazy people that thinks he's living inside the head of a clown. Or whatever it was, or I don't think there's no official answer. I think when I wrote it, officially it was all happening in Sweet Tooth's head. When I wrote that little thing very late in the game, so but I don't think that's necessarily important. That if someone were to say make another Twisted Metal Black or make a Twisted Metal Black 2. That's so important. It has to be in his head. I would say, let's talk about, do we want to be literal or not? And I haven't thought about it.
I actually, now this just came to me because I just recalled you saying it before about Calypso kind of like having like almost like a multiverse like traveler thing. That's really expanded upon on like
well, just in the sense that if there's any canon to it, whatever the fuck that even means, I mean, I know what it means, but whatever value that is to attribute canon to something anymore, I think people take a little too serious, but it is what it is. There is something accurate about the Twisted Metal, the God of War games, for example, I think make a lot of sense when you look at them and say, it's all one story. It's all one narrative. Even, which I thought what Corey did with the new one was brilliant, because even that one is part of this epic story now that began with 1, not chronologically, but again, we made 1. I think Twisted Metal, it's more correct to think about more like there's this thing, whether it's Calypso and Sweet Tooth or just sort of forces of nature that are dark and evil, that sit above the concept of the thing that is Twisted Metal. And it's presented and interpreted and multiversed in all kinds of ways. But there is a main sense of despair and horror and doom and violence and aggression that runs through it in whatever iteration that is being expressed. I think that's the accurate world of Twisted Metal. These people sitting above it, like, again, Calypso, Sweet Tooth, maybe I would say, maybe Dollface or whatever. And they're just looking into this, reflective pool of all the versions of Twisted Metal and going, this is our contribution to humanity, which is darkness and horror and chaos. I think that makes sense to me. But when you start to say, what's the definitive this or that, I don't think it doesn't have that kind of skeleton. I don't know.
No, that was actually a very thoughtful answer. Are there any aspects from Twisted Metal Black that you think, like, now, are you like, maybe I went too far, maybe that was too disturbing, or is it, I feel like it's the exact opposite, though. It's like, it wasn't disturbing enough.
I think, yes, I like having my buttons pushed. I like pushing people's buttons. I think society in the time of Black compared to now has become so such babies. And I don't mean that. I don't mean like anti-PC stuff. I'm a very politically correct, progressive, left-leaning guy. But I mean in terms of people are a lot. I think people would do well to look more into the darkness. I think a lot of people are so closed off and so putting on airs and trying to convince everyone that they're normal, that I think the sooner those kinds of people can get down in the mud of their trauma and play with it and befriend it and be with it and face it and be scared by it. I mean, I'll do that. Sometimes I'll go to sleep before I go to sleep and I'll ask my brain, I'll say, look, give me a really good nightmare. Give me something that, and I'm like, not like an emotional nightmare. I don't want to have some terrible dream that my family gets killed or anything like that. But I mean, like, I want to see a monster. I want to see some reflection of the darkness, because I don't see that often, in terms of sort of how that metaphorically manifests. So I think that stuff's important. So I would go as far as I was allowed to by whoever's spending the money.
It feels like similar to what Sweet Tooth says in Twisted Metal Black. When he's getting arrested, he's like, what a shame, like all of the people I could have killed.
Oh, I haven't killed yet. Yeah. He'll get around to it. But I mean, even that for him must be, after a while, that's got to wear off. It's like, what motivates this guy? I don't fucking know.
Do you find that there are any elements from Black specifically that are echoed in the follow-up Twisted Metal 2012, 2013?
I mean, it's closer than any other Twisted Metal follow-up. There's a huge detour from 2 to Black. But no, I mean, thematically, it's about family. It's about Sweet Tooth's fucked up family, even more so. The fact that by the end of it, we've got Sweet Tooth buried alive. His son has taken over the mantle of Sweet Tooth, and his daughter has been returned from the dead to fight her own brother. There's something there. I think all of that stuff, the fact that Mr. Grimm's story is about a guy who couldn't get his shit together, and his past ended up killing his future or his present. I mean, there's I would even argue there is a richer sense of I don't know, metaphor in the stories and in the world. It's sadder in some ways, but it still feels like the same world. Maybe a little bit less EC Comics though, and a little bit more. I don't know what the comparison would be, but it's dark and sadder, whereas I think Black was maybe dark and a little more fun.
So the jump from 2 to Black in terms of like just how much darker, like you said, the final product was that at all in response to how light and almost campy the last 2 entries had made the series?
I think so. I think that and the sales of 4 were starting to taper off for a number of reasons, not just that. And it was like, okay, if we're going to do this, I don't want to just do the same fucking thing. Part of it was that. Part of it was like, that formula is lame and it's stupid now because they've kidified it. And we, this is more sinister than they think. And so I'm sure, that absolutely played a part. Yeah.
And then Small Brawl came out.
That was supposed to be different. That was my idea, but Small Brawl was supposed to be not X-rated, but if I could have done X-rated, I would have, but it was meant to be hard R. It was meant to be like, R. Crumb and Underground Comics, and I was working on God of War, and so I wasn't really involved in the team in Utah as they do, because they're very religious, at least a handful of them that have a lot of control there. We're like, let's make it for kids. I'm like, oh, okay. Not my cup of tea. So, all right, I got time for like 1 or 2 more. I'm fried, man. This COVID thing has wiped me out.
Actually, ironically enough, I was about to close up. I think.
Oh, good. Okay, well, we're good then. All right, and I'm around. I'm around if there's any follow-ups for your video you need. Easy to reach. But my goodness gracious, man, that I feel fine now. But I hope the fatigue part of it post-COVID only lasts a couple of weeks, because it's a pain in the ass, man. I want my energy back.
I'm really sorry to hear that. Hey, if you need anything at all, any way I can help you, let me know.
Oh, I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to seeing your video, man. Thank you for having me, and thanks for talking Twisted.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to humor me yet again. And like I said,
anytime, man, anytime.
And like I said, if we could get you back for a Death Race episode of Bad Movie Night,
please let me know. I'll be there. You know it. I'll bring the pot. I'm ready to go. It'll be fun.
You and me both.
All right. Be well. Talk to you soon.
Have a good one.
Bye, guys. You too.
Thank you for joining me again. And thank you guys for joining me. I'm gonna end the stream now. So, that being said, I was your least favorite YouTuber, and that was my stream.